At just 21 years old, Marcus Thompson was living a life most people only dreamed of. Growing up in a small, modest neighborhood where everyone knew each other by name, he had always been surrounded by love, but also challenges. His parents worked tirelessly, his dad as a mechanic and his mom cleaning offices late into the night, to make ends meet. Despite their struggles, they instilled in Marcus the values of hard work, determination, and resilience. From a young age, Marcus knew he wanted more for himself and his family. He didn't want to live paycheck to paycheck or feel trapped by circumstances. Instead, he envisioned a future filled with opportunities, freedom, and success. Marcus's entrepreneurial journey began when he was just 14 years old. One day, while scrolling through social media, he stumbled upon videos of people flipping sneakers for profit. Intrigued, he decided to give it a try using money he'd saved from mowing lawns and doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. At first, it wasn't easy. He spent hours researching which sneakers would sell quickly and how to negotiate deals on online marketplaces. There were moments of frustration when things didn't go as planned, but Marcus refused to give up. Slowly, but surely he started making sales. What began as a side hustle soon turned into a thriving little business. By the time he graduated high school, Marcus had earned enough to buy his first car, a used Honda Civic that he proudly called his own. But Marcus wasn't content to stop there. As he entered college, he expanded his ventures beyond sneakers. He noticed how popular tech gadgets were becoming and realized there was potential in reselling refurbished electronics. With the same dedication and attention to detail that made his sneaker business successful, Marcus dove headfirst into this new venture. He scoured garage sales, thrift stores, and online auctions for undervalued items, repaired them, and sold them at a markup. His reputation grew, and before long, customers trusted him not only for quality products but also for fair prices. By his sophomore year of college, Marcus had saved enough to invest in something bigger, a tech startup. The idea came to him during a late-night brainstorming session with friends. They were discussing how difficult it was to find affordable, yet reliable tutoring services for students struggling in specific subjects. Seeing an opportunity, Marcus developed an app that connected students with qualified tutors based on subject expertise and availability. It took months of coding, testing, and refining, but eventually, the app launched, and it blew up. Within a year, thousands of users had downloaded it, and investors started taking notice. By the time Marcus turned 20, his company was valued at over $1 million. With his newfound success, Marcus decided it was time to treat himself to something special, a Rolls-Royce Ghost. For as long as she could remember, he'd admired the elegance and craftsmanship of luxury cars, and now, thanks to years of relentless effort, he could finally afford one. The moment he drove the car off the lot, he felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not because of the car itself but because of what it represented. It was proof that no matter where you come from, anything is possible if you're willing to put in the work. Excited to start fresh in a new environment, Marcus purchased a home in an upscale gated community. The neighborhood was beautiful, with tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, and houses that exuded sophistication. It was a far cry from the cramped apartment he'd grown up in, and Marcus couldn't wait to settle in. On moving day, he parked his Rolls-Royce in the driveway and stepped out, feeling like he was stepping into a brighter chapter of his life. Little did he know, however, that his flashy arrival wouldn't go unnoticed or unchallenged. Among the curious neighbors peeking through their curtains was Karen Wilkins, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, HOA. Karen was known throughout the community for her strict adherence to rules and her knack for poking her nose into everyone else's business. She prided herself on maintaining what she referred to as the standards of the neighborhood, ensuring everything, from lawn decorations to holiday lights, met her approval. To Karen, conformity was key, and anyone who stood out too much was immediately suspect. When Karen spotted Marcus's Rolls-Royce gleaming in the sunlight, her curiosity quickly turned to suspicion. How, she wondered, could a kid barely out of college afford such an extravagant vehicle? In her mind, there was no logical explanation. People in their early 20s simply didn't drive cars like that, or at least not legally. Determined to get answers, Karen grabbed her clipboard and marched across the street, ready to confront the newcomer who dared to disrupt the status quo. Unbeknownst to Marcus, this seemingly ordinary day would soon spiral into a drama-filled saga that would test his patience, integrity, and resolve. The confrontation came sooner than Marcus expected. Just 2 days after moving into his new home, he decided to spend the afternoon washing his prized Rolls-Royce. It was a sunny Saturday, and the weather was perfect for giving the car a good shine. With a bucket of soapy water, a sponge, and a microfiber towel, Marcus worked methodically, humming along to his favorite playlist as he cleaned every inch of the sleek black vehicle. He enjoyed the simple pleasure of taking care of something he had worked so hard to earn. The car wasn't just a possession. It symbolized years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and unwavering determination. As Marcus polished the chrome accents on the car's grille, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. Turning slightly, he saw Karen Wilkins striding toward him with purpose. She carried her ever-present clipboard under one arm, her sunglasses perched atop her perfectly styled hair. Her lips were pursed tightly, and her heels clicked sharply against the pavement with each step she took. Marcus paused mid-sponge, unsure what to expect but sensing that this encounter might not be friendly. "Excuse me," Karen began, her tone clipped and authoritative. "I need to ask you something." Marcus straightened up, wiping his hands on a towel. "Sure," he replied politely, though he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. "How exactly did you afford that?" Karen asked, gesturing dismissively at the Rolls-Royce. Her voice dripped with skepticism as if the mere sight of the car offended her sensibilities. Marcus blinked, caught off guard by the question. Was she genuinely curious, or was there something else behind her inquiry? "It's my car," he said evenly, trying to keep his tone light. "I bought it fair and square." Karen raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "At your age?" "No way. You're barely out of college. How could someone like you possibly afford something like this?" Her words stung, but Marcus forced himself to remain calm. He knew people sometimes questioned how a young person could achieve success, especially when they came from humble beginnings. Still, hearing those doubts voiced so bluntly, and in such a public setting, was unsettling. Neighbors passing by slowed down to watch the exchange, their curiosity piqued by the tension in the air. "I've been working hard for years," Marcus explained patiently. "Started with small businesses, built them up, and eventually launched a tech startup. This is the result of all that effort." But Karen wasn't satisfied. If anything, his explanation seemed to fuel her suspicion even more. She tilted her head, studying him as though searching for signs of deception. "A tech startup, huh? Sounds awfully convenient. Are you sure you didn't steal it? Or maybe it's tied to some shady dealings?" Marcus felt a surge of frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Here he was, standing in broad daylight, explaining his accomplishments to someone who refused to believe him simply because of his age. "No, ma'am," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "I earned this car honestly. I can show you receipts, bank statements, whatever you want. Everything checks out." Karen scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "Receipts don't mean anything these days. People fake documents all the time. Mark my words. You won't fool everyone forever." By now, a small crowd had gathered around them. Some neighbors looked sympathetic, while others appeared entertained by the spectacle. A few exchanged whispers, speculating about whether Marcus really was as successful as he claimed. One elderly man leaned over to his wife and muttered, "He does seem a bit young for all this." Feeling the weight of their stares, Marcus tried once again to reason with Karen. "Look, I understand why you might have questions, but I assure you there's nothing suspicious here. I'm proud of what I've achieved, and I'd be happy to share more details if you're interested." Instead of softening, Karen doubled down. "Proud? Ha! You should be ashamed, flaunting your wealth like this. Do you think this is appropriate for our community? We have standards here, you know." Marcus frowned. Standards was a word Karen used often, but it seemed to mean different things depending on the situation. To her, it apparently meant conformity, and keeping anyone who stood out too much in line. "I'm not breaking any rules," he pointed out. "My car's legal, insured, and parked in my driveway. I'm not bothering anyone." "Oh, you're bothering plenty of people," Karen shot back. "People talk, you know. They wonder how someone your age could suddenly appear with a fancy car and a big house. Trust me, it doesn't sit well with everyone." Marcus sighed, realizing that no amount of reasoning would change her mind. Karen had already made up her mind about him, and nothing he said would convince her otherwise. Still, he refused to let her negativity get the better of him. "Well, I hope they'll see the truth eventually," he said calmly. "Until then, I'll keep focusing on what matters to me." With that, Marcus turned back to his car, determined to finish washing it despite the growing audience. But Karen wasn't done yet. As she walked away, muttering under her breath about kids these days, she called over her shoulder, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." Though Marcus tried to brush off her threats, he couldn't ignore the uneasy feeling settling in the pit of his stomach. He had faced doubters before, but none quite as persistent or as vocal as Karen. Little did he know this was only the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test not only his patience but also his ability to stand firm in the face of baseless accusations. Over the next few days, Marcus couldn't shake the memory of Karen's hostile interrogation. Every time he pulled into the driveway or drove through the neighborhood, he half expected to see her lurking nearby, clipboard in hand. He told himself not to let her comments bother him, reminding himself that he had nothing to hide. Yet, deep down, he worried about what might come next. Would Karen try to stir up trouble with other neighbors? Or worse, would she take her suspicions to authorities? Despite his concerns, Marcus tried to focus on settling into his new home. He unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and explored the community. Whenever he encountered neighbors, he greeted them warmly, hoping to build positive relationships. Most people were friendly enough, though he occasionally caught glimpses of whispered conversations trailing off as he approached. It was clear that Karen's accusations had planted seeds of doubt in some minds, even if they weren't willing to say it outright. One evening, as Marcus relaxed on his couch watching TV, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from the Homeowners Association, HOA, addressed to all residents. Curious, he opened it and skimmed the contents. At first glance, it seemed like a routine update about upcoming events and maintenance schedules. But buried near the bottom was a sentence that made his blood run cold. "Concerns regarding recent behavior and property compliance will be discussed at the next HOA meeting." Marcus stared at the screen, his heart sinking. While the message was vague, its timing and wording suggested that Karen had followed through on her promise to escalate the situation. Whatever peace he had hoped to find in his new neighborhood now felt increasingly fragile. Though he hadn't broken any rules, he knew that dealing with Karen's vendetta wouldn't be easy. And as he sat there, scrolling through the email, again one thing became painfully clear. Karen wasn't going to back down anytime soon. Karen's determination to prove Marcus guilty of something, anything, only grew stronger in the days that followed. She wasn't content with simply questioning him or spreading whispers among the neighbors. To her, this was a mission of righteousness, a crusade to protect the integrity of the community from what she saw as an outsider who didn't belong. Her next move came sooner than Marcus expected, and it was far more aggressive than he could have imagined. The first sign of trouble arrived in the form of an official letter from the Homeowners Association, HOA. It landed in Marcus's mailbox on a crisp Tuesday morning, neatly typed and sealed inside an envelope bearing the HOA logo. At first glance, it looked innocent enough. A notice about an upcoming meeting and some minor reminders about neighborhood guidelines. But as Marcus read further, his stomach tightened. The letter included a formal complaint filed by none other than Karen Wilkins, accusing him of violating the community's aesthetic and ethical standards. According to Karen, Marcus's Rolls-Royce was disruptive and inappropriate for the neighborhood. She claimed its presence created unnecessary attention and drew unwanted scrutiny to the community. Worse still, she reiterated her belief that someone so young couldn't possibly afford such a luxury vehicle without engaging in questionable activities. The language was vague but damning, painting Marcus as a threat to the harmony of the neighborhood. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, staring at the letter in disbelief. He felt a mix of emotions, anger, frustration, and even a touch of amusement at how absurd the accusations were. Still, he knew better than to dismiss them outright. This wasn't just idle gossip anymore. Karen had taken things to a formal level, dragging the HOA into her personal vendetta. If left unchecked, her actions could escalate further, potentially, tarnishing his reputation and causing real headaches. Determined not to let Karen bully him, Marcus decided to address the issue head-on. He reached out to the HOA board members individually, explaining his side of the story and providing documentation to support his claims. He shared copies of his car purchase agreement, bank statements showing funds used for the transaction, and even testimonials from mentors and business partners attesting to his entrepreneurial journey. Marcus hoped that by presenting clear evidence, he could put an end to the matter before it spiraled out of control. But Karen wasn't about to back down. When the HOA board reviewed Marcus's documents and found no grounds for concern, she grew even more incensed. How dare they side with him? In her mind, Marcus was slipping through the cracks of justice because of bureaucracy and red tape. Refusing to admit defeat, Karen took matters into her own hands. She dialed 911, reporting Marcus to the police under the guise of suspicion of theft and financial fraud. When officers arrived at Marcus's doorstep later that evening, his heart sank. Two uniformed officers stood on his porch, their expressions unreadable as they asked if they could come inside to discuss a matter. Marcus invited them in, doing his best to remain calm despite the surreal situation unfolding before him. Officers explained that they had received a report alleging that Marcus might be in possession of stolen property, namely, his Rolls-Royce. They needed to verify the legitimacy of the vehicle and confirm that it hadn't been acquired illegally. For the next hour, Marcus answered question after question. He handed over all relevant paperwork, including the title, registration, and proof of payment. The officers inspected the car's VIN number, cross-referencing it with databases to ensure it hadn't been reported stolen. They also reviewed Marcus's financial records, confirming that the funds used to purchase the vehicle came from legitimate sources. Throughout the process, Marcus maintained his composure, though he couldn't help but feel humiliated. Here he was, a law-abiding citizen who had worked tirelessly to achieve success, being treated like a criminal, all because of Karen's baseless accusations. By the time the investigation concluded, it was nearly midnight. The officers apologized for the inconvenience, assuring Marcus that everything checked out and there was no cause for concern. While relieved to have been cleared, Marcus couldn't shake the lingering frustration. His privacy had been invaded, his integrity questioned, and his evening disrupted, all due to Karen's refusal to accept the truth. As he closed the door behind the officers, he resolved to take action. Enough was enough. Meanwhile, Karen remained undeterred. Even after learning that the police had found no wrongdoing on Marcus's part, she doubled down on her crusade. At the next HOA meeting, she delivered a fiery speech, accusing the board of failing to uphold the community's standards. "This isn't over," she declared, pointing a finger dramatically toward the empty chair where Marcus should have been sitting. "Someone his age shouldn't have that kind of money. Mark my words, he'll slip up eventually." Her dramatics earned mixed reactions from the audience. Some neighbors nodded along, swayed by her confidence and conviction. Others exchanged skeptical glances, quietly wondering whether Karen's obsession with Marcus had crossed the line from concerned citizen to unhinged accuser. One woman leaned over to her husband and whispered, "Do you think she's taking this too far?" Her husband shrugged, unsure how to respond. Despite the growing murmurs of doubt, Karen pressed on. She began monitoring Marcus's every move, keeping a close eye on when he left the house, who visited him, and how often he drove his Rolls-Royce. She even went so far as to snap photos of the car whenever it was parked in his driveway, convinced that she would uncover some piece of evidence to validate her suspicions. Her behavior became increasingly erratic, bordering on obsessive. Neighbors started noticing her lurking around Marcus's property at odd hours, clipboard in hand, jotting down notes as though she were conducting a secret investigation. Word of Karen's antics spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. While some residents sympathized with her desire to maintain order, many others began to see her actions for what they truly were: an invasion of privacy fueled by jealousy and prejudice. After all, Marcus hadn't broken any rules. His car was legally purchased, his home compliant with HOA regulations, and his demeanor consistently polite and respectful. What right did Karen have to harass him simply because he didn't fit her narrow definition of normalcy? As tensions simmered beneath the surface, Marcus faced a critical decision. He could either retreat into silence, hoping that Karen would eventually tire of her crusade, or he could confront the issue directly and turn the tables in his favor. For someone who had built a life on resilience and resourcefulness, the choice was clear. Marcus decided to fight back, not with anger or aggression, but with transparency and grace. He would expose Karen's baseless accusations for what they were, and prove once and for all that he had nothing to hide. Little did Karen know, her relentless pursuit of Marcus was about to backfire spectacularly. Unbeknownst to her, Marcus had already begun gathering evidence of his own: emails, text messages, and witness accounts documenting her campaign of harassment. He planned to use these materials to hold Karen accountable, not only for the toll her accusations had taken on his life, but also for the damage she had inflicted on the community's sense of trust and unity. As the days passed, Marcus prepared for the next phase of his counterattack. He invited neighbors to an open house where he intended to share his story openly and honestly. He wanted to show them the person behind the headlines, the hard-working young man who had risen above adversity to achieve his dreams. More importantly, he aimed to inspire others to embrace diversity and celebrate success, regardless of age or background. Though Karen remained oblivious to the storm brewing around her, it was only a matter of time before her actions caught up with her, and when they did, the consequences would be impossible to ignore. Determined to reclaim control of the narrative and put an end to Karen's relentless campaign, Marcus devised a plan that would not only clear his name but also turn the situation into an opportunity to inspire others. He knew that simply ignoring Karen wouldn't solve the problem. Her accusations had already planted seeds of doubt in some neighbors' minds. Instead, Marcus decided to confront the issue head-on by opening up about his journey in a way that was both transparent and impactful. His goal was to show the community exactly who he was, how he had achieved success, and why his presence in the neighborhood should be celebrated rather than questioned. The idea came to him during a quiet evening at home. As he reflected on everything he'd been through, the late nights building his business, the sacrifices he'd made, and the obstacles he'd overcome, he realized that his story was one worth sharing. It wasn't just about proving Karen wrong. It was about inspiring others to believe in themselves and their potential. With that thought in mind, Marcus began organizing what he called an open house and community workshop. He invited all his neighbors to attend, promising refreshments, live music, and a chance to learn more about entrepreneurship. The event would serve as both a celebration of his achievements and a platform to address the rumors swirling around him. To ensure the event went smoothly, Marcus spared no effort. He rented tables and chairs, hired a local band to play soft jazz in the background, and arranged for catering services to provide finger foods and drinks. More importantly, he prepared a presentation that chronicled his entrepreneurial journey from start to finish. Using photos, documents, and even video testimonials from mentors and clients, Marcus created a visual timeline of his life, highlighting key moments like selling sneakers online, flipping electronics, and launching his tech startup. He wanted every attendee to leave with a clear understanding of how hard work and perseverance had brought him to where he was today. On the day of the event, Marcus transformed his backyard into a welcoming space filled with warmth and positivity. Colorful string lights hung above the patio, casting a soft glow over the area. A large projector screen stood near the center, ready to display his presentation. Tables were set up with informational brochures about financial literacy and entrepreneurship, along with sign-up sheets for anyone interested in attending future workshops. By the time guests started arriving, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. As neighbors trickled in, Marcus greeted each person warmly, shaking hands and thanking them for coming. Some attendees were curious bystanders, eager to see what the fuss was about, while others were genuinely supportive friends who wanted to stand by Marcus during this challenging time. Even a few skeptics showed up, lured by the promise of free food and entertainment. Regardless of their motivations, everyone was welcomed with open arms. When the crowd had settled, Marcus stepped up to the microphone and addressed the gathering. He began by expressing gratitude for the turnout, acknowledging that hosting such an event required vulnerability and trust. Then, without hesitation, he dove into his story. "I know there have been questions about me," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "Some of you may have heard rumors or formed opinions based on things you've seen or heard. Today I want to share my truth, not to prove anyone wrong, but to show you that success isn't always what it seems." For the next 30 minutes, Marcus walked the audience through his journey. He talked about growing up in a modest household, watching his parents work tirelessly to provide for the family. He described the thrill of making his first sale as a teenager and the challenges of scaling his businesses while balancing schoolwork. He shared stories of failure, times when deals fell through, products didn't sell, or investors turned him down, but emphasized how those setbacks taught him resilience. Most importantly, he explained the blood, sweat, and tears that went into creating his tech startup, which ultimately led to his financial breakthrough. Throughout the presentation, Marcus kept the tone conversational and relatable. He cracked jokes, shared personal anecdotes, and encouraged the audience to ask questions. When someone raised a hand and asked how he managed to stay motivated during tough times, Marcus smiled and replied, "It's simple. I reminded myself why I started. Every step forward, no matter how small, brought me closer to my dream. And when you're chasing something bigger than yourself, giving up isn't an option." By the time Marcus finished speaking, the room was silent except for scattered applause. Many attendees looked moved, their initial skepticism replaced by admiration for the young man standing before them. One neighbor, a middle-aged woman named Linda, approached Marcus afterward and said, "I had no idea how much you've accomplished. You should be proud of yourself." Others echoed similar sentiments, congratulating him on his success and thanking him for being so open. But perhaps the most impactful part of the evening came when Marcus announced his plans to host regular workshops for local teens interested in entrepreneurship. "I want to give back to the community," he explained. "Too many young people think success is out of reach because they don't see examples of people like them achieving it. If I can help even one kid realize their potential, then all of this will have been worth it." The announcement received overwhelming support. Several parents signed up their children on the spot, excited about the opportunity for mentorship and guidance. Marcus promised to cover topics ranging from budgeting and saving to developing innovative ideas and pitching them to investors. He also invited successful entrepreneurs from nearby cities to speak at future events, ensuring that the program would grow beyond just him. While the majority of the crowd rallied behind Marcus, Karen remained conspicuously absent. She hadn't attended the open house, claiming she was too busy to participate. However, word of the event quickly reached her ears, thanks to gossip circulating among neighbors. Furious that Marcus had turned what she saw as a scandal into a PR victory, Karen doubled down on her accusations. At the next HOA meeting, she accused him of staging the gathering purely for attention and insisted that his explanations were fabricated. Her tirade fell flat, though, as several board members admitted they now believed Marcus's story after attending the open house. Karen's credibility continued to crumble as more residents distanced themselves from her obsessive behavior. Some openly criticized her tactics, calling them divisive and unnecessary. Others avoided her altogether, tired of her constant negativity. Even the HOA president privately suggested she tone down her rhetoric, warning that her actions were damaging the community's reputation. Despite Karen's refusal to back down, Marcus emerged stronger than ever. The open house had not only cleared his name, but also united the neighborhood around a common cause, supporting young talent and fostering innovation. For the first time since moving in, Marcus felt truly accepted. He had proven that transparency, humility, and authenticity could silence even the loudest critics, and in doing so, he had inspired countless others to dream big and work hard. Yet Marcus knew the battle wasn't entirely over. While most neighbors now supported him, Karen still lurked in the shadows, plotting her next move. But Marcus wasn't afraid. He had faced adversity before, and he knew that staying true to himself would always lead to victory. Little did he know, however, that Karen's final act of desperation would bring justice crashing down on her in ways she never anticipated. Though Marcus had successfully won over much of the neighborhood with his open house and newfound transparency, Karen Wilkins refused to let go of her crusade. To her, admitting defeat was unthinkable. It would mean acknowledging that she had been wrong all along. Instead, she became more determined than ever to discredit Marcus, convinced that he must have something to hide. Her obsession reached new heights as she began spreading false rumors online, taking her vendetta beyond the confines of their gated community. Karen created anonymous social media accounts under fake names, posting inflammatory comments about Marcus in local forums and neighborhood groups. She accused him of running illegal businesses, laundering money, and exploiting vulnerable people to fund his lavish lifestyle. She even went so far as to share doctored photos of his Rolls-Royce with captions like, "How does a 21-year-old afford this without breaking the law?" These posts quickly gained traction, attracting attention from both curious neighbors and internet trolls alike. Some commenters defended Marcus, pointing out the lack of evidence behind Karen's claims, but others latched onto the drama, fueling speculation and gossip. At first, Marcus tried to ignore the online attacks. He figured they would fade away once people realized there was no substance to Karen's accusations. But as the posts multiplied and screenshots made their way back to him through friends and acquaintances, he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. This wasn't just about defending himself anymore. It was about protecting his reputation and ensuring that Karen's lies didn't harm others who might be inspired by his story. With the help of a close friend who worked in digital forensics, Marcus traced the origins of the fake accounts back to Karen. It wasn't difficult. Her attempts at anonymity were amateurish at best. The IP addresses linked directly to her home Wi-Fi network, and some of the posts included phrases or details only someone familiar with the neighborhood would know. Armed with this evidence, Marcus decided it was time to take legal action. He consulted with a lawyer specializing in defamation cases and filed a lawsuit against Karen for spreading false information and damaging his reputation. The case garnered significant attention, not only because of its dramatic nature but also because it highlighted the dangers of cyberbullying and baseless accusations. Local news outlets picked up the story, dubbing it the HOA drama that went viral. Reporters interviewed Marcus, who spoke eloquently about the importance of accountability and truth in an age of misinformation. When served with the lawsuit, Karen initially dismissed it as a bluff. "He wouldn't dare sue me," she reportedly told a neighbor. But as court dates loomed closer and lawyers sent formal notices, reality began to sink in. For the first time, Karen appeared rattled. She scrambled to gather evidence to support her claims, desperate to prove that Marcus's success was somehow illegitimate. Yet despite her efforts, she came up empty-handed. There was simply no proof to substantiate her allegations. The trial itself was a spectacle. Held in a packed courtroom, the proceedings drew spectators from across the city, including many of Marcus's neighbors. As witnesses took the stand, the contrast between Marcus's calm demeanor and Karen's increasingly erratic behavior became impossible to ignore. Marcus presented a mountain of evidence documenting his entrepreneurial journey, from early bank statements showing profits from his sneaker business to contracts related to his tech startup. Expert witnesses testified on his behalf, confirming the legitimacy of his financial transactions and the value of his contributions to the community. Karen, on the other hand, struggled to defend herself. When asked to provide concrete evidence supporting her accusations, she faltered, offering vague explanations and half-truths. At one point, she claimed that Marcus's wealth was just suspicious and insisted that her online posts were meant to spark conversation, not harm anyone. Her arguments fell flat, leaving the judge visibly unimpressed. In his closing statement, Marcus's lawyer emphasized the emotional toll Karen's actions had taken on his client. "My client has done nothing wrong," he said firmly. "He worked tirelessly to achieve success, only to face harassment and baseless accusations from someone who couldn't accept that hard work pays off. This isn't just about defamation, it's about justice." The verdict came swiftly. The judge ruled decisively in Marcus's favor, ordering Karen to pay substantial damages for the harm caused by her false statements. In addition, she was required to issue a public apology, retracting all her previous accusations and acknowledging that Marcus's achievements were legitimate. The ruling sent shockwaves through the community, cementing Marcus's status as a symbol of resilience and integrity. For Karen, the fallout was devastating. Once seen as the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood, she now became a laughingstock. Many residents distanced themselves from her, embarrassed by her behavior and unwilling to associate with someone whose actions had brought such negative attention to the community. Within months, Karen quietly sold her house and moved away, leaving behind a legacy of bitterness and division. As for Marcus, life returned to normal, but with a renewed sense of purpose. The ordeal had taught him valuable lessons about perseverance, grace under pressure, and the power of staying true to oneself. He continued hosting workshops for young entrepreneurs, expanding the program to include mentorship opportunities and networking events. His story inspired countless teens and young adults, proving that success knows no age limit and that determination can overcome even the most daunting challenges. In the years that followed, Marcus remained a beloved figure in the neighborhood. Neighbors often stopped by to chat, sharing stories of how his journey had motivated them to pursue their own dreams. The Rolls-Royce, once a source of controversy, became a symbol of triumph, a reminder that hard work and honesty always prevail, in the end. Looking back, Marcus sometimes chuckled at the absurdity of it all. What started as a simple move to a new neighborhood had turned into a whirlwind saga involving accusations, investigations, and even a courtroom showdown. But through it all, he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed than ever to making a positive impact. And as he cruised down the tree-lined streets in his gleaming black car, he did so with pride, not just for what he had achieved, but for the example he had set, that kindness, transparency, and resilience are the true markers of success.